there are many things that are going on with your backhand, but it really is all stemming from your grip. So there are two issues that are going on with your grip. You're halfway between an Eastern and a continental, and you have no trigger finger. Both of those cause a problem. The grip that you're using in between an Eastern and a continental is not allowing you to close your racket face prior to contact. So you're going to notice that your racket is straight up and down before you ever go to strike the ball, which then causes a whole host of issues from that point forward. But the grip that you use where you have no trigger means that the heel pad is now off. And I'll demonstrate as best I can with as a lefty. But when you hold on to the racket, you have a 90-degree angle between your arm and racket because of the no trigger finger. So what that leads to is a contact point that's always in front of you, where the contact point, you need to be able to swing. And you know this. Again, I'm going to speak to you as if I normally speak to people, but knowing that 99% of this stuff you know. But let me just pretend that you're just Joe, right? You're Joe. So when you go to strike the ball, you know that you're supposed to swing inside out, but you can't. Because when you swing inside out, because of the relationship between your arm and racket, your racket would always send the ball off to your right. So you end up having to stand in the way of the ball so that you can contact in front of you. And I'll demonstrate it this way. So you can see that you end up contacting in front of you, which is why you can't stay sideways. It's why you pull your racket back in that wrist back position. And there are many things that occur after you hit the ball. I'm sorry, there are many things that occur after the grip, but they kind of all have cascaded from the grip. The next thing, when you take your racket back in, you turn and your arm is very bent. Now, there's some players who have arms bent when they turn. You look at Federer and you know this. When you turn though, and your arm is bent, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but you know, well, not this, you've seen the birthday hat, I'm sure. But if you were to wear a birthday hat, when you hit your backhand, you would hit the birthday hat. And again, I'm going to show you doing all of this. Your racket's here. And when you go to step into the ball and it's now time to drop the racket, you go up and you hit the birthday hat. If you were to wear a birthday hat, your racket goes up every time. That wastes time. So you turn low, too low, and then you go up and you hit the birthday hat. When you look at a Chapo, you look at team, their arm is extended and their racket's already up. And then they just turn and go down. Because you turn too low, this isn't enough power from here. So this is more of a two-handed turn where you turn and you go, man, I need more racket speed. So during the time that Stan and everyone drops, you are now going up. So now that makes you late. There was a ball in one of the videos that you hit. You hit the ball, you were late, and you kind of demonstrated this, and then you walked to the middle and you had a mad face on. You might remember you were rallying with, was it Mike or Mark? I think his name starts with an M. Mike. Yep. So you were rallying with Mike, you hit the ball and you made this face and it kind of zoomed in on your face, right? And so you lean back, but it wasn't this. It was, and you'll see this, your racket always, it's kind of like you're on the first floor of your house and you're going to race to the basement, and you always go to the second floor, then go to the basement, and then you wonder why you always lose the race. So you always go up first, then you begin dropping, which is going to make you late on depth and speed and when there's spin and penetration from your opponent's shot. The next idea, and again, I'm going to show you all this. The next idea is, because of the grip, because of the going up during the time, you really should just let the racket parlay down into the drop rather than going up first. You then cannot drop down in the slot behind you. You end up, just going to make sure you can see this, you end up taking a shortcut to the ball. And when you go to the shortcut of the ball, two things occur. You let go too early with your right hand, which means it can no longer be a counterweight. The counterweight of the right arm only occurs if it comes forward. What I like to teach is to hit a 2.5-hander. Don't hit a 1-hander. That the right hand for you is going to stay on longer than you think it should. That way, from the side, the right hand shouldn't be behind you, but it should actually come more to like your belt buckle, groin almost. Then it has a place to go back. If it lets go too early, there's nowhere for it to go, and it gets pulled forward, especially with the contact point, because of your grip. Everything starts to twist. Now, because of your grip, your racket is straight up and down in the back. I should really, you're in between a continental and an Eastern backhand. Mm-hmm. That means you're 22.5 degrees off with the grip that you should have. Each panel is 45 degrees different, 360 divided by 8. So you're a half a panel off. So that's half of 45, so 22.5. So your grip is 22.5 degrees off of what it should be. And that results in your racket not being closed prior to contact, but it's always on edge. So what that leads to is having to pull across, because if you were to actually swing up, the ball would go out. So what you end up doing, because your racket is straight up and down, you start rolling the racket to try to get it to be square against the back of the ball. Sometimes you time it perfectly and you're like, that's it. I just need to hit enough balls and I can get this. The majority of the time, it doesn't matter how many times you hit the ball, because it's like going to Vegas. Eventually that house wins, and you're not gonna, it almost gets worse the more you play. So what you end up doing is you end up doing what's called the left side of the letter V. So if I take two rackets here and I draw the letter V, you should have the right side of the letter V. Now, the pros don't always do this, just like I don't always write the alphabet like I learned in kindergarten. But they taught me those letters for a reason, to get all students to look the same, and then they can have a range of acceptability as they get older. As long as it's legible, you can read their handwriting. When you watch this from Stan and you watch this from Federer, whatever, what you're doing is you're changing the wrist angle. And that means sometimes you hit long, sometimes you bury it into the net. If you do it too late, ball goes out. If you do this too early, ball goes in the net. What I want you to do is what every pro does in certain situations. Every pro on the pro tour finishes in the right side, or if they're a lefty, it's the left side of the letter V, in certain situations. Return of serve, when they're hitting down the line, when they're late, if their opponent's at the net and they're just trying to play the ball, because when they're taking the ball on the rise, because it keeps the wrist angle intact. So every pro does this, and then that's why you then lay open, really for all the reasons, from the grip to not closing the racket face. So I'm going to compare you now, and I'm just going to give you systematically what you need to practice and the checkpoints. Let's just look at the backhand to begin with here. So there you've got no trigger, and I'm going to show you this all with the pros. So the no trigger, I'm going to show you, you can see your turn. So look where your turn is. You got the bent arm. Mm-hmm. Now watch your racket up. Your racket from here always hits the birthday hat, where the pros just turn and then drop, but you go back and then up and then down. So all of this is the wasted time that doesn't allow you to actually drop below the ball to swing up to contact. So that's why you swing very flat into the back, because you go back up and then into the ball. And you'll see it here. On all of your backhands, you turn and then you always raise from this point where you should just drop. You go up first. And you actually do a little bit of a pre-stretch. The racket actually goes, you'll see the racket go in front of your hand. So the racket kind of goes forward, and then the hand goes down, and then the racket kind of gets snapped back, and it's kind of an accelerant for you, but it's not really a controllable accelerant. You'll see that as your racket drops, look at your racket, it's actually slightly open as you're hitting the ball. You can see that the right hand is letting go during the drop, and your right hand starts going back before you ever hit. The right hand shouldn't start going back until just before you hit the ball. It should not begin going backward before you ever even begin going to the ball. But this right here, you know, we're talking about a lot here, but this is a Mount Rushmore idea, that your racket face is slightly open and at best straight up and down at this point. You can see again that the racket face is on its edge. We can actually see right here where your grip is. You can see where the base knuckle is, and that it's not on the top panel. It's on the corner between continental and eastern. Again, that's something, even if you were to just change your grip, that would take the racket from going from here. Let's actually do it. Let's do 22.5 degrees. So right there, at least right there, if you just change the grip, your racket would go from pointing like this to pointing like this. And so just doing that is going to help you close off the racket face. The reason you need that is so you can swing up and out and actually spin the ball. And then as you hit, you can see that you've got the left side of the letter V. So I'll just draw the letter V. You've got the left side of it, and you open up. It's even more pronounced. There's that racket lift. So you can see where the racket is, and you always lift the racket up. And that's what makes you late. And then the racket drops. There's the racket on its edge again, slightly open. And I think this one you hit cross court. Here's a great view of it. Look at the roll of the wrist, how you roll the racket. It's, you know, when students think they roll over the ball, which obviously we know isn't what happens, but that's the feeling you've got to have. So when you hit cross court, you really have to roll the racket over to try to get on the outside of the ball, when that's just not going to be in your best interest. So we're just going to take the base knuckle and the heel pad, and we're going to put them straight on panel number 1 on the very, very top. So we'll look at, you can see you don't have a trigger finger and he does, right? And so that means there's a different grip position, and I'll talk about that in front of the camera. This is the turn that I want you to learn. So when you take your racket back, strings are visible to the camera, and your racket is very laid open. Your racket's very laid open. And so when you turn, I want you to turn with your hitting arm straighter and with the racket head straight up and down. I measured this, and his racket is basically 7 degrees open. I just used the wall here, and then we go like this. And that's where I got 7 degrees. Obviously, that would be 180 if it was a straight line. So he's 7 degrees open, where yours is much, much more open. So having the racket very straight up and down, and the more straight up and down, the better. So I want you to turn with what's called on edge, the arm straighter, and I'm going to show you Chapo and Dominic Thiem doing that, with the tip of the racket up. Now, you'll see when he drops, notice he does not go up. He just turns and goes down. Where again, I already showed you, you always add this upward movement, which is what's going to make you late when a ball comes really fast to you. Here's Thiem, the lefty, very straight up and down. Notice that his racket is on its edge. When he takes the racket back, you can see that from right here, the two of you are in very similar places. Notice his arm is straighter. It's straighter. It's not locked, and it doesn't have to be locked. That can aggravate the arm, but yours is much more bent. Look at the direction his racket goes. Right here, it just goes down. Your racket always goes up. In the heat of battle, this becomes even worse. So on a ball machine, it's one thing, but in the heat of battle, where you're off balance or you're stressed and whatever, change of direction, you're getting frustrated or anything, you know, in the second set, this makes it even worse, and it just kind of exacerbates the problem. So really, really important idea that I want you to turn in with that better grip, with the racket up, tip pointing up like we saw from the back. And that is no going to the birthday hat. From right there, we just go down. So the next thing is the drop. And when he turns, racket's very straight up and down. And then I want you to notice how when the racket drops, his racket is closed. Again, we saw this, your racket straight up and down. When the racket is closed, you then get to swing up and out with confidence. When your racket is slightly open or square in the back, what happens is when you swing up, the racket face opens from this point. The racket at contact will always be more open than prior to contact. At contact, if the racket is closed, then it'll be square at contact. If the racket is on edge or slightly open in the back, then it will be wide open when you get to the ball, which means the ball goes out, unless you roll the racket over. That leads us to the left side of the V. When he drops the racket, not only does he drop the racket and close the face, I want you to notice where his right hand is. His right hand went with the racket. Your right hand is going against the racket. So you're letting go and you're trying to go this way with your right hand. He's keeping the right hand going with the ball. And then just before he hits the ball, like within, inches of hitting the ball, that's when his right hand comes to a stop and he then starts going back. And by the way, right side of the letter V. But he's got the closed racket face and then his right hand goes forward. So this is when I tell people, I want you to feel like you're almost hitting a 2.5-hander. I'm sorry, a 1.5-hander, that your right hand is almost still slightly on the racket. One of the most common mistakes players make with a one-handed backhand, and you can see you've already let go, is they let go before they ever drop the racket. The turn and the drop should be two-handed. Even as you go to the ball, the right hand should go with the racket. Then it goes back. It should not go back prior to hitting because you've used that energy up and then it's done. You can see that it's dissipated. You've tried to move it back, but it's no match for the racket, going in across, especially with the contact point you have because of the grip. And then your racket goes wide open. It's why when you're done, you face forward, where you'll see Chapo goes back and his right hand is actually visible on this side of his body, on the other side of his body. You can see his right hand coming forward. Now, Stan is a player who doesn't really do the hand going back. He definitely just kind of rotates and he does this. You can see the V he has. I mean, that's not even the left side of the V. I don't know what letter that is. It's not a V. I mean, he's way over. Again, I don't want you to copy this because that doesn't make Stan. That is something that he does after he hits the ball and he just lets the racket roll. He has incredible timing and one of the best backhands of all time. So I don't want you to copy that. What I do want you to look at, though, is his racket face. Look how his racket face is closed. Again, your racket is on its edge when it drops. This is so important. And it's something that I just didn't see in the videos that you were doing. Again, so here is a great view of his right hand coming forward. So remember I said that the right hand should come to where your groin is. So his right hand, I'm going to show you from the side, his right hand comes forward with the racket. So I want you to notice you let go and your right hand, I'm going to draw the outline of your body. There's the outline of your body. There's the outline of his body. His hand came forward in front of that. Your hand never goes into that line. So you let go too soon. What Dominic Thiem does is he brings it forward. Now watch it go back. And that's when his hand goes back. What you want is the hand to come forward. Then it actually has room to go back. If you let go too soon, you don't have any room to go back because it's kind of where it needs to eventually go. And so it's not moving. So it's not actually a counterweight. It's not moving in opposite directions. This view actually shows really nicely the difference in the contact. So this is really apples to apples. And I know that you're hitting the ball cross court and that on this backhand, Chapo is basically, I'm just going to count that as straight ahead. I'm not even going to say that it's cross court. I'm just going to say it's straight ahead. Notice we can see his arm, see his forearm, where we can barely see your hand. that tells us that his hand is more off to his left. That means his contact point is off to his left. That means he was swinging inside out. That's because his racket face was closed, and the grip relationship, because of his trigger finger that he has when he takes the racket back, the racket is placed in his hand differently, so that the contact point is actually more to his left. Your contact point is always here, which puts your hand here. That's why your hand is always in front of you. And that's why your racket, again, rolls and the racket goes off to the left side of your hand. This is a similar situation. And this was ball after ball. I didn't cherry pick this. Ball after ball, your hand, really, there's your contact right there. Shot after shot, your hand is the only thing we can see. And some of the times, Ian, we couldn't see it at all. And then here's the forearm that we can actually see. So obviously his contact point is more off to his right. And then we're going to look at the finish. This is really the only way that I teach a one-handed backhand for what I'm teaching you right now. I don't teach anything else. I think the one-handed backhand is actually the easiest stroke in all of tennis to teach because there's so few parts to it, to be honest. And specifically the finish that I'm teaching you. So here is Medvedev serving. Again, I just flipped them. So Medvedev's a lefty. Here's Tsitsipas. So look at the finish. So this is switch. So here is the right side of the letter V. When returning serve, the pros do this all the time on one-handers. They make this move all the time. The same angle that he has here between his forearm and his racket stays. It's the same angle. And he's finishing with his strings facing up. That means there's no wrist play whatsoever. There's nothing going on in his wrist. Does he always do this? Of course not. Sometimes he's straight up. Sometimes he's way over here the way you have it, where you're rolling the racket over. So I am cherry picking here, but what I'm doing is pulling pieces of pros' movements and specifically a certain shot from each pro to kind of show you the backhand technique that is absolutely going to like revolutionize your backhand. And the right side of the letter V is the way you're going to do it. Not every pro, I should say, every pro does this. They don't do this on every shot, though. They just do it when they need to maximize control. And I don't care if it's down the line or across court. It's the exact same thing. You can keep that side of the V, and you can hit down the line, cross court. You can hit the ball anywhere, keeping that same side of the V. You don't have to roll the wrist over like this in order to be able to hit the ball cross court. I'll show you a couple more. Here's JP for Taro. I think this guy got to number 80 in the world. This is actually Roddick. Now Roddick is not lefty, but both these guys are right-handed. You can see his racket's wide open. That's why I didn't show you that from him. He actually lets go of the hand too soon, in my opinion, but not for a pro. He just lets go of it too soon for a recreational player. But there's the left side of the letter V. I'm sorry, I'm used to talking to right-handers. That's the right side of the letter V. He has kept the wrist angle, and he smokes this ball. And then two shots. Oh, here's another one. There's the same V again. So he's got that exact look that I want you to have. And he just does this all the time. There's the same V. Right side of the letter V. The pros, in certain situations, when they're trying to gain control, will use side of the V all the time. He hit 3 backhands there, topspin, and all 3 used the right side of the letter V to keep his wrist angle intact so that he had no wrist to maximize control. Taking a ball on the rise. And this is actually a lefty. And there's the left side of the letter V. Keeping his wrist intact. He is not allowing that angle to change. We can see the trigger finger. And then hitting on Welby's wall or at Welby's wall. And there's, watch his right hand coming forward. Closed racket face. These are all the checkpoints that you want. Notice the right hand is coming forward with the racket. Then it goes back. But look at the right side of the letter V. So when you turn, you have to have the grip. You have to turn with a straight arm, racket very straight up and down. The racket should drop with both hands, even start to go toward the ball with both hands. Again, you're not going to go up first. That'll make you late. You just turn and watch when he turns. He just turns and he doesn't go to his to the second floor. He just takes the racket back. There's his arm straight. And then he just drops from there, closes the racket face so that he can swing up and out, because a closed racket face allows you to swing up and out, where an on-edge racket will always lead to you swinging across. Otherwise, the ball will go over the fence. And the right hand will track toward the contact. And his right hand goes backward, keeping the chest to the side, the right side of the letter V. I want you to have your heel pad on the racket and have a trigger. That will automatically set the contact point more to your right. When you have the hand a little farther over and you turn the grip farther over, that is going to help you close the racket face. What you need to do is practice turning like this. Arm extended. Maybe it'll be a little easier from the side. I want to show you all angles. Arm extended, racket up, not arm bent and down, and especially strings facing the back fence if I'm hitting the ball that way. I want you to turn with the arm extended. And when you film yourself in the back, Ian, I want you to only be able to see the edge of the racket. And I want you to probe around and move in that position. From that position, you have to just go down. And one of the things I like to teach students is to let go of their hitting hand. Because the only way you can hit the birthday hat first and make this move, which makes you late, is to recruit the muscle. So gravity is a great teacher. And so what I like to have people do is just from here, let go of the racket and then grab on and swing. Start here, let go of the racket and then grab on. Not really even with a ball, but just to shadow swing and understand that if you just let go of the racket will just begin to drop. So let go and drop. Now, when you do this, I just want to really make sure you can see everything that I'm teaching here. When you do this, the racket has to go down with your right hand. So all of that time that was wasted going up first, now we get to just turn and then drop. And when you drop, you're going to drop with both hands using your right hand to close the racket face. When your racket face is closed prior to hitting the ball, it will be square at contact. The racket at contact is always more open than it was in the back. If your racket is straight up and down, because our arm is a pendulum, our racket naturally wants to open. So because your racket was dropping on edge or sometimes slightly open, you would go to the ball would shoot out. So you learned to make this move. Well, once you start to turn it, you've got about the width of your belly button to make contact with the ball. And when you do that, that's when it's like, that's it. You just got to do that a million times. You want a contact zone, not a contact point. You have a contact point because you have to roll the racket to try to square up the racket against the back of the ball, which body in motion tends to stay in motion. And that's why you have the left side of the letter V. So closing the racket face, because of the grip, because your right hand is assisting to close the racket. Then as you go up to the ball, your racket will be square, and then you can actually swing because now you have the farther grip and the trigger finger. Now you can actually swing away from your body because you're not going to have a 90-degree angle between your arm and racket, which is why your heel pad's off, so that's why you have a 90-degree angle. Your racket is perpendicular to your arm. Now it's less of an angle. So now you can actually contact out here rather than having to stand here. As you go to the ball, the right hand should come to your crotch. And I could have showed you Dimitrov and I can show you Federer, and we could make this video 10 hours long if needed, but the right hand from the pros best comes forward in front of their groin. The right hand comes forward, then it starts going back. And this is the same on a slice and a topspin. I tell my students, one-handed backhands are only one-handed when you're hitting the ball. It's two-handed leading up to contact. That's why I say it's a 1.5-hander. You almost feel like the other hand is still on the racket slightly as you strike the ball. So then you go up to the ball, you spin, and I am in my basement here, and I'm only 5'8" with no socks or no shoes, and I can easily hit the ceiling here. So I apologize. But when I hit this ball, I'm spinning, and then now the right hand, just before I contacted the ball, started going back. That helps me accelerate the racket even more. And then I've got this. And what I want is the right side of the letter V. Do all the pros I just showed you finishing in the right side of the letter V, do they finish like this? Absolutely. But I don't want you to, because I'm trying to teach you not to make that move. I want you to learn this. So when you're finished, you will just keep the right side of the letter V. Return of serve, on the rise, down the line passing shots are great times that the pros do that all the time. And then you'll do that on every single backhand, and until you start to feel like you can start to adjust it. The higher contact, that's when the racket can go over a little bit, but I just want you practicing that right side of the letter V. So it's grip, the higher turn, which is called on edge. You turn on edge, so someone behind you only sees the edge of the racket. You're going to drop with both hands. You're not going to go up. So just think gravity drops with both hands, closing the racket face. This is so important for the success of your backhand. You're going to start to swing toward the ball with both hands. Then you let go, and then your arms go apart, right side of the letter V, and then you're going to finish.
So now that I've had a little bit of time to digest what Ryan presented to me, and I'm back from California. When we did that session together, I was in the middle of my coaching. Actually, it was before I started coaching out in California. So several weeks have passed, all of which I was coaching. I'm rehabbing my shoulder as of right now. I'm not back on the court training yet. So what do I do now? What are the next steps? First of all, I just need to say a huge thank you to Ryan. He did not ask me to do this, but I think it's really important just to point out that he provided me with a tremendous amount of value and insight in a very short period of time. Just compare, I think online coaching instruction is so, of course I'm biased, obviously. This is what I've been doing for over a decade now, full time. But you think about what Ryan provided me in less than an hour compared to the insight and the value that you get from a normal tennis lesson. Normal tennis lesson has its place, in person, live repetitions, there's pros and cons. But when it comes to diving deep into technique and getting outside perspective and insight, I think the amount of value Ryan delivered to me in that short period of time was incredible. And so if you like how he structured it, I highly recommend you go to 2minutetennis.net, click on Train with Ryan, and you can sign up. I thought it was incredibly valuable what he provided to me. So in terms of moving forwards, I like what he said at some point in there. It was very early on. He said this probably isn't a direct quote, so I shouldn't have it in quotes. But he said something along the lines of, everything stems from the grip. And I think that's very smart, and coming from a very experienced place as a teacher. Anytime you can knock down dominoes one after the other by fixing something up the chain and having it trickle down to other things, it's huge. And so I think looking back over my progress and my journey with the backhand and what I've been working on, I think that the grip could be definitely one of those things. So with that in mind, here's my near-term focus. Now that I have this insight from Ryan, he presented it extremely well. The body turn is going to continue to be huge for me. It's what led to my shoulder tear. The body, my core, my shoulders, my torso has to do more of the work. And I've made progress, but I still have work to do. But switching the grip and starting with the racket higher, as he pointed out, instead of it being lower and then coming up and down again and trying to make up for the weak grip and trying to close the racket face. And did you notice how there was kind of that cascading effect of different technical elements? I think that this is priority number one for me still, but if I get this stronger grip and I start a little bit higher and I can start to combine these three things and then simply drop and just relax and let the stronger grip and my relaxed arm just fall and then be pulled by my more strong and active body, I think that can lead to a lot of the other dominoes getting knocked over, further down the chain, the other elements that Ryan was talking about. I don't know for sure, But what I do know is I don't want to overwhelm myself with too many things to think about and too many balls in the air that I'm trying to juggle all at the same time. And this I've made progress on, but I have more work to do. And I think adding these elements to it could potentially really get the snowball rolling in a really positive direction. So I'm going to spend time with just those things, evaluate, and then move from there, potentially down the chain of the other things that Ryan pointed out further on down the chain. My goal here is to optimize the swing without overwhelming myself, giving myself too many things to think about. So these are my thoughts now that I've had some time off the court, away from the court, to kind of process, think about it, and also rewatch. That's another huge benefit of these kinds of training sessions, the ability to rewatch the session after being away from it for a little while and be able to view it away from the moment where he first presented it to me. It was really, really valuable. So Ryan, thank you so much. If you're watching, I hope you learned something from viewing this, obviously, especially if you have a one-handed backhand. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. If you were me, how would you proceed? What was it about Ryan's presentation that you thought was especially valuable or insightful? And what steps do you think I should take? This is what I'm going to do, at least to start. And as always, I'll take you along with me for the ride. So I'm not sure exactly when I'll be on the court again next. I'm working on my rehab, but when I do, this is going to be my focus, and we'll see how it goes. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.